Sometimes the loneliest moment in your life happens when you're sitting across from an empty chair, realizing the person who promised to show up never intended to come at all. Emily Carter stared at the untouched cup of coffee in front of her as steam curled gently into the air before fading away. The small cafe on Main Street buzzed with the familiar sounds of a Friday evening. Conversations blended together. Dishes clinked softly. A barista called out drink orders from behind the counter. Yet somehow, despite being surrounded by people, Emily had never felt more alone. She glanced at her phone again. 6:23 p.m. The date had been scheduled for 6 o'clock. 23 minutes late. She tried to convince herself there was a reasonable explanation. Traffic in downtown Charlotte could be unpredictable. Maybe he was stuck in a meeting. Maybe his phone battery had died. Maybe he was rushing through the door right now with an embarrassed smile and a sincere apology. But deep down, a quiet voice was beginning to tell her the truth. This wasn't the first time life had disappointed her. At 29 years old, Emily had learned how to recognize disappointment long before it arrived. She was a single mother raising 5-year-old Lily on her own. Every day was carefully planned around school schedules, grocery budgets, and long work hours at a local medical office. There wasn't much room left for herself. There certainly wasn't much room for dating. In fact, she hadn't been on a real date in nearly 3 years. Her friends had encouraged her to try again. They insisted she deserved happiness. They reminded her she was still young, still beautiful, still capable of finding someone who would appreciate her. After months of hesitation, she had finally agreed to meet a man she'd been talking to online. He seemed kind, respectful, interested in getting to know her. For the first time in a long while, she had allowed herself to feel something dangerous. Hope. Earlier that evening, she had stood in front of her bathroom mirror for nearly 20 minutes deciding what to wear. Nothing expensive, nothing dramatic. Just a simple navy blue dress that made her feel confident. Lily had smiled when she saw it. "Mommy, you look pretty," her daughter had said. The memory made Emily's chest tighten. She had wanted tonight to mean something. Not because she was searching for someone to rescue her. She had rescued herself a long time ago. But because she missed having someone to talk to at the end of the day. Someone who might understand how exhausting and rewarding life could be at the same time. Someone who might see her not only as a mother, but as Emily, the woman behind the responsibilities. The woman who still carried dreams she rarely spoke about. She looked once more toward the cafe entrance as the bell above the door chimed. Her heart lifted for half a second before sinking again when a different customer walked in. The chair across from her remained empty, waiting, silent, like a promise slowly disappearing with every passing minute. The minutes continued to slip away, each one feeling heavier than the last. Emily lowered her eyes to the coffee that had long since cooled and wondered why she was still sitting there. 6:37. Then 6:42. Around her, tables filled and emptied. New customers arrived. Others left smiling, carrying leftovers and warm conversations into the evening air. Life moved forward for everyone else while she remained frozen in place, staring at the empty chair across from her. Her phone vibrated suddenly against the table. The sound made her heart jump. For a brief moment, relief washed through her. Maybe he was finally reaching out. Maybe there had been an emergency. Maybe she had judged too quickly. She grabbed the phone and unlocked the screen. The message was from him. Emily's hopeful smile disappeared almost instantly as she read the words. "Sorry, I changed my mind. This is probably not the right fit for me. Good luck." That was it. No explanation. No apology that meant anything. No concern for the woman who had spent nearly an hour waiting. Just a few careless words delivered from a safe distance. Emily stared at the screen, reading the message again as if somehow it might change. It did not. The disappointment settled over her like a heavy blanket. She felt foolish for believing tonight could be different. Foolish for spending time choosing her outfit. Foolish for arranging childcare with her neighbor. Foolish for letting hope sneak back into her life after keeping it guarded for so long. Slowly, she locked the phone and placed it face down on the table. She did not want to cry. Not here. Not in front of strangers. She had spent years teaching herself how to stay strong when life became difficult. Single mothers did not have the luxury of falling apart every time something hurt. There were bills to pay, school lunches to pack, little girls who depended on them to keep moving forward. But strength did not make disappointment disappear. It only taught you how to carry it quietly. Emily inhaled slowly and forced herself to look around the cafe. Across the room, a young couple laughed over a shared dessert. Near the window, an older husband and wife sat close together, their conversation comfortable and effortless. The sight made her chest ache unexpectedly. She was not jealous of their happiness. She simply missed the possibility of her own. Her eyes drifted toward the entrance again before she caught herself. There was no reason to keep looking. He was not coming. The truth was finally impossible to ignore. A waitress approached with a gentle smile. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked kindly. Emily shook her head. "No, thank you." The waitress hesitated for a moment as if she understood more than Emily wanted anyone to understand. Then she quietly walked away. Emily reached for her purse and began gathering her things. The evening was over. The risk she had taken had led nowhere. She would go home, kiss Lily goodnight, and tell herself this experience did not matter. Yet as she slid her phone into her bag, another painful thought surfaced. What hurt most was not being rejected by a stranger. It was realizing how badly she had wanted the chance for something better. And just as she prepared to stand, the bell above the cafe door chimed again. Emily paused with one hand resting on the strap of her purse as the cafe door opened. A rush of cool evening air drifted inside, followed by the sound of several small voices talking at once. She glanced toward the entrance without much interest at first, expecting another couple or a group of friends arriving for dinner. Instead, she saw 4 children enter together, all appearing to be around the same age. Their energy immediately filled the room. One boy was pointing excitedly toward the display case of pastries, while another argued that chocolate chip cookies were clearly the best choice. Nearby, 2 girls were discussing something with the seriousness only children could manage, their identical expressions making it impossible not to smile. For the first time all evening, Emily felt her attention pulled away from her own disappointment. The children moved through the cafe like a small whirlwind of curiosity and excitement. A few customers glanced up from their tables, amused by the lively group. The atmosphere shifted almost instantly. The sadness that had been weighing on Emily moments earlier loosened slightly. Not because her situation had changed, but because children had a strange way of reminding people that life kept moving no matter what happened. Then she noticed something unexpected. One of the girls looked directly at her. The child could not have been older than 6. She had bright eyes and a thoughtful expression that seemed unusually observant. For a moment, the girl simply watched her. Emily quickly looked away, embarrassed by the possibility that her disappointment had become visible. She picked up her purse again, determined to leave. But before she could stand, she heard one of the children whisper something. Another child followed the first girl's gaze toward Emily's table. Soon, all 4 children appeared to be looking in her direction. Emily almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Out of everyone in the cafe, somehow she had become the center of attention for 4 curious strangers. The children exchanged quiet comments among themselves. Their voices were too soft for her to hear clearly, but she could tell they were discussing something important. Then one little boy frowned slightly. His expression carried genuine concern. Emily felt a sudden warmth in her chest. Children notice things adults often ignored. They did not always understand complicated situations, but they recognized emotions surprisingly well. She remembered how quickly Lily could tell when she was having a difficult day, even when she tried to hide it behind a smile. Thinking of her daughter softened her heart. Lily would have loved watching these children. She probably would have introduced herself within 5 minutes and convinced them all to become friends before the evening was over. The thought made Emily smile despite herself. It was small and brief, but it was the first genuine smile she had managed since arriving. Across the room, the observant little girl seemed to notice. She smiled back instantly, as though pleased by the result. Emily felt something shift inside her. The hurt was still there. The message on her phone still existed. The empty chair across from her still reminded her of what had happened. Yet somehow the evening no longer felt quite as heavy as it had a few minutes earlier. She did not know who these children were or why they seemed interested in a complete stranger sitting alone in a cafe. She only knew that their presence had interrupted a painful moment she would rather forget. And as she watched them continue their quiet discussion, she had no idea that the next few minutes were about to change the direction of her entire evening. The children finally stopped whispering among themselves when a tall man stepped through the doorway behind them. He looked to be in his late 30s, dressed simply in dark jeans, a light gray button-down shirt, and a navy jacket. There was nothing flashy about him. No expensive watch displayed for attention. No dramatic entrance. In fact, if Emily had passed him on the street, she probably would not have looked twice. Yet the moment he entered, the four children immediately turned toward him. "Dad, can we get cookies?" one of the boys asked. "Dad, Noah already picked first last time," one of the girls protested. "Dad, tell Ava she is making that up," another child added. The man sighed with the exhausted patience of someone who had clearly handled hundreds of these conversations before. "One at a time," he said with a tired smile. "I only have 2 ears." Emily could not help smiling again. There was something genuine about the interaction. The children were energetic, but they listened to him. More importantly, he listened to them. Not with the distracted attention many adults gave children, but with real focus. He knelt briefly to speak with them at eye level, and all 4 immediately quieted down. The small moment revealed more about his character than any introduction could have. Emily had spent enough years raising Lily to recognize a devoted parent when she saw one. The family moved toward the counter to place their order. As they waited, the children continued glancing toward Emily's table. The little girl who had smiled at her earlier seemed especially interested. Every few seconds, she looked back at Emily with a thoughtful expression. The man eventually noticed. He followed her gaze across the room and briefly made eye contact with Emily. She looked away quickly, suddenly self-conscious. A moment later, she felt slightly embarrassed. Why should she care what a stranger thought? He did not know her situation. He had no idea she had just been left alone in a cafe by someone who never intended to show up. To him, she was simply another customer sitting by herself. Still, when she looked back, she noticed he was no longer watching. His attention had already returned to the children. They collected a tray filled with drinks, sandwiches, and a few desserts before searching for a place to sit. Unfortunately, the cafe had become much busier over the past hour. Nearly every table was occupied. Several customers had arrived while Emily was debating whether to leave, and now only a handful of seats remained available. The father scanned the room, balancing the tray carefully while the children followed close behind. One by one, potential tables turned out to be unavailable. Some were too small. Others already had people seated there. Finally, his eyes landed on the large seating area near Emily's table. It was designed for multiple groups and had several empty chairs surrounding it. He hesitated for a moment, clearly considering whether to ask. Emily instinctively looked down at her purse. She had planned to leave, yet somehow she remained seated. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was the comfort of watching a family interact with such warmth after the disappointment of her evening. Or perhaps she simply was not ready to walk out the door carrying the weight of that message. Before she could decide, the man approached with a polite smile. "Excuse me," he said. "Would you mind if we sat here? It looks like every other table in the place is taken." Emily looked up at him and, for the first time that evening, felt that the night might not be over after all. Emily hesitated for only a second before offering a small smile. "Not at all," she replied. "Please, go ahead." Relief crossed the man's face. "Thank you. We appreciate it." He carefully set the tray down while the 4 children immediately claimed their seats. The group settled around the large table with the familiar chaos of a busy family. One child wanted the seat closest to the window. Another insisted they had chosen that spot first. The discussion lasted less than 30 seconds before their father calmly resolved it, and everyone moved on. Emily watched with quiet amusement. It reminded her of countless moments with Lily. Family life was rarely neat or perfectly organized, but there was something comforting about its unpredictability. "I am Ethan, by the way," the man said as he took a seat. "And these are Noah, Liam, Ava, and Emma." Emily nodded politely. "Emily." The children greeted her with cheerful smiles. Emma, the observant little girl who had been watching her earlier, seemed especially pleased to finally know her name. For a few minutes, everyone focused on their food. Emily considered leaving several times, but each attempt was interrupted by some small moment at the table. Liam accidentally got powdered sugar on his nose while eating a pastry. Noah laughed so hard he nearly spilled his drink. Ava corrected both boys with the confidence of someone twice her age. Even Ethan could not suppress a smile. The atmosphere felt warm and effortless. Eventually, Emma looked directly at Emily. "Are you waiting for somebody?" she asked innocently. The question was simple, but Emily felt her stomach tighten. Ethan immediately looked embarrassed. Emma, he said gently, you do not have to ask people personal questions. Sorry, Emma replied quickly. Emily could see genuine concern on the little girl's face. It was impossible to be upset. It is okay, Emily said softly. Actually, I was waiting for someone earlier. Emma tilted her head. Earlier? Emily forced a small smile. Yes, but I do not think they are coming anymore. The table grew unexpectedly quiet. Even the boys seemed to sense something important hidden beneath her words. Emma frowned. That is not nice. Emily laughed softly despite herself. No, I suppose it is not. Ethan looked at her with understanding rather than curiosity. There were no intrusive questions. No awkward attempts to get details. Just a quiet acknowledgement that something unpleasant had happened. Somehow that simple kindness felt refreshing. Most people either demanded explanations or offered advice she had not asked for. Ethan did neither. He simply respected her dignity. A few moments later, Emma slid something across the table toward her. It was a chocolate chip cookie. Emily blinked in surprise. What is this? She asked. Emma shrugged. Sometimes cookies help when people are sad. Noah immediately protested. That was supposed to be your cookie. Emma shrugged again. She needs it more. The sincerity of the gesture caught Emily completely off guard. She felt a sudden sting behind her eyes and quickly looked away before anyone noticed. All evening, she had been carrying disappointment alone. Yet somehow the first person to offer comfort was a little girl she had met less than 10 minutes ago. Emily picked up the cookie and smiled. Thank you, Emma. The child beamed proudly. Around them, the cafe continued buzzing with conversations and laughter. But for the first time since arriving, Emily no longer felt like the lonely woman abandoned at a table. Instead, she felt like she had somehow become part of a small circle of kindness she never expected to find. Emily took a small bite of the cookie and smiled. I think you might be right, she said. Emma looked extremely satisfied with herself, while the others immediately began debating whether cookies possessed magical healing powers. The discussion quickly became surprisingly serious. Noah insisted chocolate chip cookies could solve almost anything. Ava argued that brownies were far more effective. Liam declared that ice cream deserved equal consideration. Before long, even Emily found herself laughing. The sound surprised her. Less than an hour ago, she had been fighting back tears. Now she was sitting with a family she had never met, listening to children passionately defend dessert-based solutions to life's problems. Ethan watched the conversation unfold with a quiet smile. I should warn you, he said. Once they start debating food, there is usually no end in sight. I can believe that, Emily replied. My daughter would fit right in. The children immediately turned toward her. You have a daughter? Emma asked. I do, Emily said. Her name is Lily. She is 5. That is our age, Noah announced proudly. We are 6, Ava corrected. Almost 6.5, Liam added. Ethan shook his head. They have been 6.5 for what feels like 2 years. The children groaned while Emily laughed again. The easy rhythm of the conversation continued. For the first time all evening, she stopped checking the clock. She stopped thinking about the message on her phone. Instead, she found herself talking about Lily's love of drawing and how she insisted on bringing stuffed animals to nearly every important event in her life. The children listened with fascination. Emma especially seemed interested in every detail. She sounds nice, Emma said. She is, Emily answered softly. She is my favorite person. Ethan nodded knowingly. I understand that feeling. There was something in his voice that caught Emily's attention. Not sadness exactly, but experience. The kind that came from years of putting children before everything else. She looked at him more carefully. You have your hands full, she said. That is one way to describe it. He smiled. Most days feel like organized chaos. Only most days? Emily asked. You must be doing better than I am. That earned a genuine laugh from him. It was warm and unforced, and Emily realized. This was the first adult conversation she had enjoyed in quite some time. Not because it was extraordinary, but because it felt honest. There were no games. No pressure. No attempts to impress anyone. Just two parents sharing a table and comparing notes on survival. As the children became distracted with their snacks again, the conversation shifted naturally. Emily spoke about balancing work and motherhood. Ethan admitted that managing 4 children often felt overwhelming despite his best efforts. Neither tried to pretend parenting was easy. In fact, Their mutual honesty created an unexpected sense of comfort. Then Ethan glanced at the empty chair that still sat across from Emily. He did not ask questions right away. Instead, he chose his words carefully. "For what it is worth," he said quietly, "anyone who leaves someone waiting like that probably did not deserve the opportunity in the first place." Emily looked at him, surprised. There was no pity in his expression, only sincerity. Somehow that made the words matter more. She lowered her eyes briefly before answering. "Thank you." For a moment neither spoke. Yet the silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. And as the sounds of the busy cafe continued around them, Emily realized something important. The evening she had thought was ruined had somehow become one of the most meaningful nights she had experienced in years. The conversation might have continued that way for another hour, if not for the unexpected interruption. A man in a business suit walking toward the counter suddenly slowed down when he noticed Ethan sitting at the table. His eyes widened with recognition. "Mr. Brooks?" he asked. Ethan looked up and immediately seemed uncomfortable. "Good evening," he replied politely. The man smiled. "I cannot believe it is really you. I attended your company's leadership conference last year. It changed the way I run my business." Ethan thanked him graciously, but Emily noticed something interesting. He seemed eager for the interaction to end. After a brief exchange, the man wished him well and continued toward the door. As soon as he left, the children returned to their desserts as though nothing unusual had happened. Emily, however, found herself curious. "Leadership conference?" she asked. Ethan sighed softly and rubbed the back of his neck. "I was hoping that would not happen." "Why?" Emily asked. Before Ethan could answer, Noah spoke up proudly. "Dad owns a huge company." Ava immediately added, "Actually, several companies." Liam pointed a finger at his brother. "You always forget that part." Emma nodded in agreement. "Dad says bragging is not polite." Ethan laughed. "Thank you, Emma. That is exactly right." Emily looked from the children back to Ethan. "You never mentioned that." "Most people do not ask," he replied. "And I prefer it that way." She studied him for a moment. Everything suddenly made a little more sense. The confidence, the calm demeanor, the way he carried responsibility without making it obvious. Yet nothing about him matched the image she usually associated with wealthy executives. There had been no boasting, no attempts to impress anyone, no subtle references to money. In fact, if the stranger had not recognized him, she never would have guessed. "What kind of company?" she asked. "Technology," Ethan answered simply. "Mostly software and business systems." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Mostly," he smiled. "It is a long story." The children immediately groaned. "It is always a long story," Noah said. Ethan chuckled. "Fair point." Emily expected herself to feel intimidated by the revelation. Instead, she found herself oddly unaffected. The information was surprising, certainly, but after spending the last hour with him, she realized something important. The most impressive thing about Ethan was not whatever success he had achieved in business. It was the way he listened when his children spoke. It was the patience he showed when they interrupted him every 30 seconds. It was the fact that despite everything he apparently owned, he was spending a Friday evening sharing cookies with 4 energetic 6-year-olds. As if reading her thoughts, Ethan looked toward the children. His expression softened immediately. There was genuine affection in his eyes. Not obligation. Not performance. Love. "They are the reason I do any of it," he said quietly. "Everything else is just work." Something in his voice changed during those words. Emily noticed it instantly. The warmth remained, but there was another emotion beneath it. A sadness carefully hidden under years of practice. For the first time that evening, she wondered about the story behind this family. 4 children. 1 father. No mention of a wife. No wedding ring. The same questions he had politely avoided asking her now surfaced in her own mind. Yet before she could decide whether to speak, she noticed Ethan staring briefly at the table, as though remembering something far away. And suddenly she realized that beneath his success, beneath his confidence, and beneath the laughter surrounding him, he was carrying a loss of his own. For a few seconds, the lively energy around the table seemed to soften. The children continued eating, but Emily noticed the subtle change in Ethan's expression. It was not dramatic. In fact, most people probably would have missed it. Yet after years of carrying her own private disappointments, she had become surprisingly good at recognizing when someone was hiding pain behind a smile. She chose her next words carefully. "You do not have to answer if you would rather not," she said gently. But I get the feeling life has not always been easy for you either. Ethan looked at her for a moment before glancing toward the children. His eyes lingered on them with unmistakable affection. It has been a few difficult years, he admitted quietly. The children fell unusually silent. Emily immediately understood that whatever story existed behind this family was not a secret. It was simply a reality they all carried together. Their mother passed away 3 years ago, Ethan said. The words were calm, but Emily could hear the weight behind them. The children were very young. Emily felt her heart ache. Suddenly many things made sense. The devotion, the patience, the sadness she had noticed beneath the surface. I am sorry, she said sincerely. Ethan nodded. Thank you. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Emma quietly placed her hand over her father's. The gesture was small, but it seemed practiced, as though she had done it many times before. Ethan smiled and squeezed her hand gently. We miss her every day, Ava said softly. Noah nodded. Especially on birthdays. Liam stared down at his dessert. And school events. Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. The children were so young, yet they spoke with a maturity that could only come from experiencing loss earlier than most. She found herself wishing Lily could remain protected from that kind of heartache forever. Ethan noticed the sadness on Emily's face and offered a reassuring smile. We have good days too, he said. A lot of them, actually. They make sure of that. The children immediately brightened. Dad cries during movies, Noah announced. Only the sad parts, Ethan protested. And the happy parts, Ava added. And commercials sometimes, Liam said. The table erupted with laughter. Even Ethan laughed. The heaviness lifted slightly, replaced once again by warmth. Then Emma looked directly at Emily. Her expression was thoughtful in the way only children can be. I think my mom would have liked you, she said. The words landed with surprising force. Emily blinked, completely caught off guard. You do? She asked softly. Emma nodded without hesitation. You are kind. And you listen when people talk. The other children exchanged glances before quietly agreeing. Ethan looked equally surprised. For a brief moment, nobody seemed to know what to say. Emily felt her eyes sting again. Not because of sadness this time, but because of the unexpected sincerity behind the compliment. Earlier that evening she had felt invisible, sitting alone beside an empty chair. Now she was being seen in a way she had not expected by people she had met only an hour before. And as she looked around the table at Ethan and the 4 children, she realized something remarkable. Somewhere between disappointment and dessert, between heartbreak and laughter, 5 strangers had managed to make her feel less alone than she had in years. 1 year later, Emily stood beneath a canopy of string lights in a small park overlooking a peaceful lake just outside Charlotte. The evening air was warm, and laughter drifted across the grass as friends and family gathered nearby. Looking around, she could hardly believe how much life had changed since the night. She had almost walked out of a cafe, believing she would never see Ethan and his children again. What had begun as an unexpected conversation over coffee and cookies had slowly grown into something neither of them had planned. There had been no dramatic rush, no fairy tale shortcuts, just countless ordinary moments that gradually became extraordinary. Weekend trips to the zoo with Lily and the Quadruplets. Family movie nights that usually ended with someone falling asleep on the couch. School events, birthday parties, and long conversations after the children were asleep. Through it all, Emily had come to know Ethan not as a successful businessman, but as a devoted father who never stopped putting his children first. And Ethan had come to admire Emily's strength, kindness, and unwavering love for Lily. The children, however, had been the true architects of everything. They welcomed Lily from the very beginning, treating her like a sister long before any adult dared to imagine what the future might hold. Now 6 children raced across the grass together, their laughter blending into one joyful sound. Lily ran beside Emma while Noah and Liam argued about a game nobody else seemed to understand. Ava followed behind, correcting everyone equally. Watching them, Emily smiled. They looked exactly like siblings. Ethan stepped beside her and gently took her hand. You are smiling again, he said. I know, Emily replied. I do that a lot these days. Before Ethan could answer, the children suddenly appeared in front of them. The timing was suspiciously perfect. Emma grinned. We are ready. Ethan laughed softly. Ready for what? Dad, Noah said dramatically. We practiced this. Ava rolled her eyes. You are ruining it already. Liam pointed toward the small wooden platform near the lake. Just go stand over there. Emily exchanged an amused glance with Ethan as they followed the children's instructions. Once they reached the platform, the 6 children formed an uneven line in front of them. Emma stepped forward first. We talked about this for a long time, she announced proudly. Very long, Noah added. Painfully long, Ava corrected. The adults laughed. Then Ethan slowly knelt on one knee. Emily's breath caught. The children immediately broke into excited smiles. Ethan looked up at her with warmth, gratitude, and love shining clearly in his eyes. A year ago, a chance meeting changed my life, he said quietly. Not because I found someone perfect, but because I found someone real. Someone who made our family stronger simply by being herself. Emily, will you marry me? Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. Around them, the children waited anxiously. Lily squeezed Emma's hand. Emily looked at all of them and realized something beautiful. The family standing before her had not been created by luck or money or coincidence alone. It had been built through kindness, trust, healing, and love. She smiled through her tears and nodded. Yes. The children erupted into cheers. Ethan stood and wrapped his arms around her as the 6 children surrounded them. And in that moment, Emily realized the empty chair she once feared had led her exactly where she was meant to be all along.